Hello, welcome to the vlog. So this is Intro Murphy because last week I started off the vlog and then decided to skip last week's vlog. So this is a combination of two. So this is Intro Murphy, making this a little bit smoother to say this is 2 weeks worth of reading. Here's the first book. I have started City of Last Chances. I don't know how I feel about it here at the beginning. It's a lot. I am listening to it on audiobook, which is unfortunate for me, just because there's so much going on here at the beginning of the book. We're introduced to a lot of different perspectives. This is a pretty vast world, and the world building starts early, and it's really interesting. It's a fascinating world, but the world building starts early, the city that we're in, and it's just a lot of characters to keep straight, and it's all on audio, which I just don't think is helping me for this particular book, but it's also very engrossing. I think that the prose in City of Last Chances is actually astounding, both in the technical sense, like he'll say, much like Pratchett, he'll say something very simple, but he'll say it in such a beautiful way. It's not flowery, it's just intelligent. The way it's done is very crafty. So if you happen to be a prose appreciator like me, I think you're gonna like it. I think you're gonna like these prose on this prose on a technical level, but then also from a creative level. The way he's crafting his storytelling, how he'll have this more wide scale introduction to a chapter, and then he'll zoom in on a single character and get a closer look on the scene that he's just painted in a more broad way, or he'll introduce a character and then he'll say, we'll get back to her in a little bit. So it's like this narrator's voice that's really crafty, as well as on a technical, more micro sense. The prose is also so beautiful. Just the writing is keeping me reading. Also, the city that we're in, that everything is taking place in, is really fascinating. It's a city under occupation, and you can see that the culture in this city is kind of getting squashed down and snuffed out. Actually, this book is reminding me in a lot of kind of broad strokes way of the Dandelion Dynasty, but not in many ways, it's nothing like that. But you can see in day-to-day interactions how culture is just kind of being pushed down and squashed down for more uniformity, as well as information being withheld for the sake of the powers that be, to maintain power, to hold power. I don't know, there's a lot of very interesting world and political and social things happening within the city. But as someone who's very much a character-driven reader in a lot of ways, I'm also feeling a lot of disconnect with this book, because we're thrown so many characters, so many perspectives all at once. We're not getting a lot of time with any of them, at least here in the beginning, and so I am feeling really disconnected on a personal level. On an intrigue level, I'm there, but on a personal level, I feel a bit at arm's length. So I don't know how I feel about this book yet. That was a lot of information to throw at you when I'm pretty early on in the audiobook, but the physical book that I'm going to be reading while listening to this audiobook is for another vlog that I'm doing, so you won't hear about it right now. But that is the audiobook that I'm going to be focused on for the rest of this vlog. Welcome to the vlog. Hello! So I posted a community tab because I skipped last week's vlog because I realized that City of Last Chances was going to take longer. Like I was starting it in that vlog, but I wasn't going to finish it. And it just seemed like it was going to be an unsatisfying vlog, so I'm combining the two. In that community tab, I mentioned that I would make cinnamon rolls and then eat them all myself. Don't worry, I shared them with my kids. But y'all have a lot of faith in me. There were quite a few comments saying that you were excited to see me make them, or that you wanted me to share a recipe with you. Friends. I use the exploding can. I don't make that stuff. I looked up a recipe and thought, well, maybe I'll just make them this one time from scratch so that people will think that I'm impressive. But that was a lot of work, so I didn't even try. And I used the exploding can. Anyway, I finished City of Last Chances, and it was very good. Okay, so in my last clip, I talked a lot about the writing. That stayed true. I think the writing is actually the thing that astounded me about this book the most, both on the small scale and wide scale level. The prose was incredible. I want to read more from this author. I've read Children of Time and I enjoyed it, but I really didn't continue to explore this author's work at all. But after reading City of Last Chances, I need to read more of his writing. So I'm going to. I've actually already picked out my next read by him. But also the world building was phenomenal. This all takes place in a city, and within this city there's so much going on. You have the different factions. You have the elite, the ones that are occupying the city, the ones that are dictating and ruling and squashing down the people who lived here originally, and their different cultures and the factions that they create to enact their new laws, just temporarily. It's a temporary force that's been here for hundreds of years that's here to enact their new laws and to force this streamline culture and expectation that everybody has to follow the authoritarians. But then you also there are demons in the city, and they have demon contracts. But then you also have the factory workers and the lower level people who also have a system of hierarchy among them. There's this place called the Wood, which is at the very beginning of the book, no spoilers at all, that serves as a portal, and there's these creatures inside of it. It's just, there's so many layers to this world, and around every corner there's something new to discover that is so engrossing. And then plus, this book really focuses on the rebellion. It focuses on this city that is under occupation, and the people that are oppressed, and the people that want their old ways back and want their freedom back, but are always just kind of waiting for someone else to start it. And it's all these little things, it's all these small things that kind of boil up to leading us to those small sparks that finally ignite the rebellion. And it's like, it's such a slow build, it's such a slow start, but it boils into something very, very satisfying. Now, I still felt at arm's length by the end of the book with some of the perspectives. There's quite a few perspectives. Some of them I loved and I really wanted more from. Some I could have done without, and I never really felt... There were some characters that I never actually felt attached to the character. I was more interested in their plight. I was more interested in what was happening to them as a storytelling device, and less as a person. And as a character-focused reader, that did hinder my enjoyment personally. And there were certain parts of the novel that I do think dragged a little bit, so maybe the pacing could have been tightened a little bit. So even though there were certain things that weren't perfect for me, this was a book that was well worth reading. And after reading this book, I just need to read more from this author, so I'm going to. And I posted a video on Tuesday, it's already live, that I'm about to film after recording this clip, that talks about what my next book by him will be. So check that out if you want to. I've forgotten the title, otherwise I would just tell you right now. I have started the Profit of Edan. I'm very early on in this chunker, this brick, but it's a really strong start. The prologue begins with an epic dragon fight. That's not a spoiler, there's a dragon on the book, so I hope you knew that there would be dragons. If not, I'm not responsible for what the cover did. Started out so strong. Philip can really write a battle, which reminds me, Philip's my friend. So just disclosure, this is someone that I care about, and I am excited to read his book. If you want to skip this part of the vlog because you don't want to hear me talk about my friend's book, fair. There's timestamps. Philip can really write action. He writes these intense moments so well. So it started off with a bang, and then after that really explosive start, it slowed down quickly. So right now I'm still kind of just waiting for that momentum to pick back up. I mean, not that I need a battle in every chapter, but you know, I'm waiting for that momentum to start again. I'm excited to see where he takes this sequel, because I thought that book 1 was very promising. It was a great start to a series, and I'm excited to see how he evolves these characters and their arcs, especially since I loved Sequara, and she wasn't a strong presence in book 1, and I didn't love Dayraven. I didn't dislike him, but I wasn't as attached to him, and I want to see his character develop and see where the story takes him, and see how I end up feeling about him at the end of this book, as well as several other characters that I'm interested in, but those are the two that I'm like, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do with these characters? So I'm really excited to see how that pans out. Welcome to the vlog. This is the second clip I didn't have to say that. Hi, it's Intro Murphy again, except now I'm Outro Murphy. So I have read 400 pages of The Profit of Edan, and a school bus is driving by right now. So this is by my friend Philip Chase, which I mentioned in the other clip. This is the sequel to The Way of Edan, and this has gone in a direction that I wasn't quite expecting. I guess I didn't know what I expected from book 1, but book 1 was very traditional fantasy with Philip's own introspection, and it had a lot of Buddhist themes to it. It had a lot of focus on life and death and the circle of life and interconnectivity and connectivity to one another and to the earth. So it was a lot of standard fantasy setup as far as classic fantasy feels, with a lot of Philip's own thoughts and introspections that he weaved into it, which I thought was really nice. And then book 2 is going in, it still has that classic fantasy feel. It still has very skilled prose, I think, but it's also going in some interesting directions. So book 2 takes place in the midst of a holy war. We have enslaved dragons. We have epic battles. It's a lot darker than book 1 was. In certain ways, not grimdark, but there's quite a few scenes that cause me to pause, and I'm like, ooh, okay, let me take a breather after that one. But also the two biggest perspectives that we're following are Dayraven and Sequara. Dayraven has this struggle that he's dealing with, where he has a pull on his life. He has a direction that his life has to go in, that it needs to go in, and then he has his own desires and ambitions and goals and things that tie him to the way that he wants to go in. And there's this sort of back and forth of him going through this training and learning more and having to find that balance and having to find how he can move forward, not kind of striving against this piece of himself, this thing that happened. Well, it happened in the beginning of book 1, so it's fine for me to say. There's an elf shard in him that is changing the trajectory of his future. So he has to learn how to kind of accept this future and stop striving against it, because it's not the future that he would have chosen for himself. And Sequara is going through something relatively similar in that she has a lot of duty and she has a lot of expectations on her life as a future queen. And she, I think, handles it so nobly. Like, I love her character. I love her personal reaction to the situation that she's in and to what her expectations are and her duties are. I just find her to be a really noble character, and I very much like her. There's also, speaking on another plane, there's a little bit of some angst and longing in this book, which I don't love. It's just not my thing. I'm not an angsty gal. So there's definitely a piece of me that's like, oh, we're okay. All right, we'll do that. But yeah, it's still very familiar, but still also very uniquely Philip. And I think he struck that balance really well, where it feels like, oh, okay, I'm reading classic fantasy, but also I'm reading classic fantasy told by someone else, told in a different way, bringing a lot of those Buddhist themes in and bringing a lot of that that connectivity and not striving against what life has for you, as well as making peace with life and finding that balance of self-ambition, self-desire, self-indulgence, gratification, and what's best for all. It's just very interesting. It's a book where I can't help but think about the conversations that I've had with Philip, and I see them being had in this book too, which is fun for me. We will be having a spoiler-filled discussion on this book on Joanna's channel, probably sometime in September, so you can look out for that if you're reading it as well, or if you're just interested and don't mind spoilers. I think we'll probably have a spoiler-free section as well, but I'm not done with it yet, obviously, but you know, I've been reading it. I also have been reading an Ascendance of a Bookworm, and I really like this. I've been told to read this for so long, and I just haven't because there's so many things to read, you know, but finally a couple people on my Patreon have kind of pushed me into this buddy read, and I'm so glad they did, because the first 2 volumes I was a little bit, I don't know, I didn't know if I was going to see this through, because it's very slice of life, and it starts out with a girl who dies, and she is reincarnated. It's an isekai. She's reincarnated in a small child's body. She's 20 years old and reincarnated in a 5-year-old body, and so she's very not independent anymore, but also she lived a life where she kind of always had enough, and she was comfortable, and she loved to read, and she had limitless access to books. And now she's in a world where she lives with a poor family. She's in a very humble setting, like it's not very developed. There's a lot of hard work involved in simply surviving. And there are books in this world, but they're not very accessible. They're just accessible to the wealthy, because parchment is very expensive and very sparse. And so her goal is to learn to experiment with her surroundings and with what is available to her, learn to make paper more accessible, and bring books into this world in a more accessible way. And along the way, she ends up inventing a few other things that are familiar to her from her world that allow her to be able to gain assets so that she can get started on the paper making process. But there's also this little boy that's her friend that helps her with everything, and he's the sweetest in the whole wide world, and she has this amazing relationship with her family. And so it started out being very slice of life, very just, you know, this 20-year-old in a child's body that occasionally throws 5-year-old tantrums and who just really wants books and can't really cope with being in this new world. And I don't know. First 2 volumes were okay, but volume 3 won me over, and now it's something so much more. It's still the slice of life, it's still cozy, and it's still wholesome, and it's still a big emphasis on creating and learning and making a future for yourself and learning the customs of today, of where she is now. But it's also moments of darkness, where she talks about this disease, this devouring that is trying to kill her. She talks about giving into it. She talks about hopelessness. She talks about her friend having to carry her corpse back home. You have this cozy slice of life story that has these moments of stark, like, oh, right, this is not an easy life that she's living, and this is not easy hurdles that she's having to overcome. And as the volumes have progressed, that kind of darkness that's always been present is coming more to the forefront, not just in the devouring, but also in the system that the city is built around, the levels of prosperity that they have, and the systems in place to keep that prosperity going the way it is, the way that there is a solution to her sickness, but it's really only held for the nobles and the rich because of the structure of this society. So her only choices are very rough. Just so many things. There's a lot of depth that's being pushed forward in this cozy, sweet, wholesome slice of life story, and I love it. So I finished the first arc for Ascendance of a Bookworm, and I've been reading the manga, not the light novel, so I'm going to take a break now and focus on To Your Eternity, and I will come back and read the second arc soon. And I'm probably going to have to switch to light novels because the manga isn't adapted that far out yet, which is fine by me because I'm completely invested in the story and I want to know what happens next. So that is my check-in for the first book of Ascendance of a Bookworm, the first arc, and I'm going to take a break, read something else, and then I'll come back to the second arc soon. Anyway, those are the things that I read over these last 2 weeks. City of Last Chances, a good chunk of the Profit of Edan, and the first arc of Ascendance of a Bookworm. If you've read any of these, if you want to talk to me about any of them in the comments, please feel free. I post videos every Tuesday and Thursday on this channel, Mondays and Fridays on my other channel, which is always linked in the description. I'll see you again soon. Bye.